fourth year graduate student at Emory in neuroscience, and I'm also a CBCT teacher. Been involved with that for a few years. And I'm very excited tonight to be helping to facilitate this very, I guess, rare occasion opportunity to have a dialogue between a Zen Buddhist monastic, Jogen Salzburg, who comes to us from Great Bao Zen Monastery in Oregon, and Geshe Dadul, who's a resident monastic here. So the way it's going to work here tonight is there will be some opening remarks by Jogen, and then Geshe Dadul will be responding, and then we'll have an opportunity for some questions from the audience, from you. Just to give a few more words, tonight the topic is called Cutting the Fetters to Compassion. So we're just kind of offering a comparative treatment of compassion from both the Zen and Tibetan perspectives. And like I mentioned, Jogen is coming from Oregon, from Great Bao Zen Monastery, which is kind of a hybrid from both the Soto and Rinzai schools. He's been living as a monastic for over a decade now, and was ordained in 2006. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the monastic practices in the Zen tradition are quite intensive. So kind of over the past 11 years, his residency is cumulatively equivalent to 3 years of silent retreat practice. And many of you might already be familiar with, probably are, with Geshe Dadul, who is working with the Emory Tibet Science Initiative, translating science texts into Tibetan for the monastic communities in India. So, I think without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jogen.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. It's an honor to be here, an honor and a little embarrassing to be up here with Geshe Dadul. We had a little chat about Buddhism and science and the traditions before we came down here, and it was very inspiring. One thing this practice may not help you with is handwriting, as I'm looking at my notes here. Thank you. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. It's customary to recognize lineage. Before speaking of the Dharma, I would like to just acknowledge Shakyamuni Buddha, the Indian masters Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, who were major influences in my tradition. The masters of China and Japan, especially Eihei Dogen Zenji in Japan. And then to acknowledge my root teachers, Chozen and Hogen Beis. And any errors or murkiness in my presentation of the Dharma is entirely mine and is not representative of these people. So there are many concepts about compassion. And it's vital that we have this concept and this teaching. In a way, it's medicine for a culture, for all cultures, but for all our culture, which is so self-centered. We live in a culture that is fixated on the expression of the individual, perhaps to an unprecedented degree. Our culture is oriented towards instant gratification of me, my, mine, my desires. And actually, we're greatly empowered by technology now to actualize these desires without delay. So the Buddha Dharma bringing this precious teaching of compassion into our culture is vital. And yet, it's easy to miss. We can understand compassion as an idea and miss a richer truth in what that is pointing at. So compassion is not merely a feeling. It's not merely a transient emotion. It's not merely a consoling or a lofty ideal, though it is those things too. In the Zen tradition, we speak about two aspects to compassion. So the first aspect is a sensitivity, an acute perceptivity to suffering, to the suffering of ourselves, an acute receptivity and perceptivity to the suffering of others. And then from that perceptivity and receptivity, a response. That compassion is not actualized unless it's responded to in some way. And those ways are as widely varied as there are people, as there are situations. There's no fixed formula. In many ways, if you think in terms of the 6 realms of the Buddhist teaching, is everyone familiar with the 6 realms? The teaching? Yeah, pretty much. So the 6 realms of existence, whether you interpret them psychologically, spiritually, or literally as actual places, are the realm of the hungry ghost, or constant craving and thirsting. The heavenly realm, where beings have a long lifespan and lots of pleasure, and there's very little discomfort. The hell realms, which are marked by intense suffering, usually associated with anger. The jealous God realms, which is the realm where we have power and we are attached and want to protect that power, and so we battle with each other to protect our good fortune. The human realm, which hopefully most of us are in right now, and the realm of the animal realm, which literally our cats and dogs are in that realm, but also whenever we're driven merely by instinct or the desire to satisfy, gratify desires blindly. This is the animal realm. Did I miss any, Geshe?
I think you got that.
Okay. So, in many ways, American society is a heavenly realm. It's a heavenly realm, and because we are dwelling in a heavenly realm, at least materially, it can make sincere Dharma practice difficult. There are thousands of flavors out there. There are myriad distractions. There is so much comfort in our culture that we can, because of our affluence, numb out or tune out the basic existential suffering that we all carry. There's so much affluence and there's so many ways to avoid the truth of dukkha, the truth of suffering. And yet, if we look under the surface to any degree at all of our companions in this human journey, we see to one degree or another dukkha, dis-ease. We see friction. We see that people's lives may be pervaded by a sense of meaninglessness, aggression, a kind of spiritual poverty, a desperation, a confusion. The philosopher Henry David Thoreau said, "Men live lives of quiet desperation." And we can see this. So, in the context of compassion, we have to slow down enough to really see each other, to recognize this living reality in each of us. We have to be present enough in our own hearts, minds, and bodies to recognize viscerally the ill-being that we live within. And suffering is not an idea, it's the texture of the unawakened mind. Then reckoning with our own lot of dukkha, then we can look with empathy in the eyes of a brother or sister sentient being and recognize, take in, acknowledge the suffering that marks their lives, that marks all of our lives. There's a suffering of gaining and losing, because as we know, everything is impermanent and transient. If it comes, it goes. If we got it, we'll lose it. There's the suffering of sickness, aging, and death. There's the suffering of restlessness, of always wanting to have or be or get something, somebody, something else. So when we open our eyes and hearts to this pervasive suffering, then the seed of bodhicitta can grow. And I'll return to the ideal of bodhicitta in a bit. So as far as I understand, all of the Mahayana traditions recognize the causes of suffering at different levels. So at the most apparent level, it's the three poisons. You could call it the three distortions or the three pollutants of the human mind: aversion, attachment, and unconsciousness, or sometimes translated as ignorance. Now, the presence of the three poisons is suffering. Just the fact that they're arisen in consciousness, there is a discomfort. It's not comfortable to be angry. It's not comfortable to be caught up in desire. It's not comfortable to numb out from experience because it's difficult to be present with. So not only is the presence dukkha, but being under the influence of the three poisons, our actions cause and contribute to the dukkha of the world, to the suffering of the world in gross and subtle ways. Now, there are so many beautiful practices in all of the traditions that we have inherited to antidote aversion and attachment and their companion negative emotions. For the arising of anger, we can apply metta, we can apply loving kindness. We can practice equanimity with the arising of desire. And these are good practices. And these are essential practices. But if we really want to free up our potential for compassion, if we are going to recognize in our own direct experience that the very fabric of reality, the very fabric of this moment is compassion, we have to zero in on, we have to attenuate and eventually cut through the root of ignorance that exists in our own minds, the mistaken view of self. As long as this basis of our actions is the confusion of the separate self, we will contribute to the confusion of our societies. And in this context, it is imperative that we as Dharma practitioners wake up, that we practice wholeheartedly. All of us with the incredible fortune to encounter this sacred Buddha Dharma, these teachings, we have a responsibility to put them into practice and to actualize them as deeply as we can. It's not something to be taken for granted that all of these liberative technologies are available. There are many, hundreds of thousands of people, intelligent people, who do not have access to teachings on meditation, compassion, the nature of mind. They don't have teachings about cause and effect. They've not encountered genuine lineages and places of practice. So it's imperative that we really act on this opportunity and take the practice as deeply as we can for ourselves. So the Buddhas teach that all self-centered actions, and self-centered is not a pejorative. I lack a more perhaps skillful term for that. It's not a pejorative, it's just, in a way, an experiential fact. The Buddhas teach that all self-centered actions spring from the sense of I am. I am as a separate, enduring entity. Now, if we have meditated even for 2 minutes, in our minds we recognize the presence of an endless cascade of I-based thinking. I'm too itchy, I'm too hot, I'm too bored, I'm too sleepy, I want, I need. We recognize thoughts of I am XYZ. We recognize thoughts of I was XYZ, I will be XYZ, I would like to be XYZ. This thought of I, that is in a way the realm we swim in of our own minds, this thought of I, to what does it refer? Right now, where is this I located? Please look in your direct experience. Turn your attention right now to the place that you feel I resides. It's a very simple turning of your attention, wherever you feel it. Is it in the heart? Is it in the face? Is it in the earlobe, the elbow? feel the sense of I am and turn your attention right to it, what happens? What happens when we attend directly to this sense of I am? It is our meditation task to examine exhaustively and come to the same verification as all the masters of India, China, Tibet, Japan, that this I is without substance, that the self cannot be found, and yet, when we turn our attention to this I am, there is a presence. There is a spacious, open, cognizant awakeness. And that this cognizant, spacious, open awakeness that is not a thing, and yet we are aware this is our true nature, and this is the true refuge. So right now you're insubstantial, yet lucid awareness, the very fact that you are aware right now, effortlessly, is complete. This clear, lucid awareness without affliction sees clearly, is intimate, is responsive naturally. Our clear, lucid nature of awareness that each of us is replete with, in a way we could say we are, for lack of more skillful language. This lucid awareness is not located inside. It's not located outside. It's not located in between. And yet, all of us are awake at the most fundamental level. So right now, where does your seeing end and these visual forms begin? Where is the demarcation? Look directly into your experience. Right now, where does your your hearing end and sound begin? Look directly into your own experience. Where is the division? Right now, we are completely interpenetrated with each other. Right now, we are like this, one. Right now, all sentient beings are intimate with our own essential nature. This is not philosophy. Just notice right now, there is no division between what is seen and the seer. We're looking into our own awareness. So all of us have the capacity to recognize and live from the clear, light nature of mind. We can recognize it. This is our birthright. Knowing the true nature of our own being is not mysticism. According to the Buddhist teachings, it's just the way things are. The nature of our mind is the nature of our mind. Now, sometimes the traditions, because we have so many, at least personally, incredibly inspiring examples of people who've given their lives and fully realized this basic truth of their nature, fully realized the Dharma, what has crept into the tradition is sometimes a subtle transmission of limiting beliefs. The limiting beliefs of it takes 40 years to realize your true nature. The limiting belief that you must leave society and live in seclusion. A limiting belief that only a monastic or an ordained person can have realization. A limiting belief that deep practice that really touches the essence of who we are is for a select elite. And that is an unfortunate thing if we buy into those limiting beliefs. Is it difficult? Yes. Do we each have the capacity to recognize our own nature? Of course, because it's our own nature. We absolutely have that capacity. So I feel the most compassionate movement, and I believe I speak on behalf of the Zen Buddhist tradition, that the most compassionate action one can take is a life oriented towards awakening. The most compassionate way we can live is a life that's oriented towards awakening from our identity crisis. Because if we live from the view of self, in a way we are in crisis. Awakening from our concepts of substantiality. Awakening from our diminishing concepts of time and space, self, mind. Now back to bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is this most beautiful word. I believe it translates something like heart of awakening, or awakening heart, or mind of enlightenment, or the aspiration for awakening. Now, all the lineage masters that I have encountered in their teachings have made bodhicitta primary, the practice and the cultivation of the mind of awakening, awakening for the sake of all sentient beings, primary. And personally, my life is guided by, or more and more oriented towards, and made meaningful by the prayer, may I and all beings recognize our true nature. May we all see what is most true in human life. So I feel that the aspiration and cultivation of bodhicitta is our most precious and vital practice. Because then we orient that this practice is not merely about me calming my mind. It's not about me having a special experience. It's not me about becoming some radiant bodhisattva who floats through Walmart undisturbed by the vicissitudes of samsara. It's about clearing out my own afflictive emotions so that I can respond and serve and be present in an open and free way. Shantideva said that if our aspiration for practice is small, it's like opening up a small shop that only serves so many beings, a few items that a select few can partake of. But when we rouse the aspiration to awaken for the sake of all beings, when we look out at the suffering of our society and see that we need people who are clear-minded, who are rooted in something that is reliable, whose refuge is not the temporary vicissitudes of the mind, that aspiration orients us and fuels our practice. Bodhicitta is not just a positive thought. It's fuel for actually getting our behinds on a meditation cushion. Because if we only do it for ourselves, our fuel will peter out and we'll only practice for so long. It's a fuel to get us to retreat. It's a fuel to actually work with our own minds, because everybody, and you can ask your spouse or your coworkers or your siblings about this, everybody suffers our own mind. We're not separate. Everything that we are afflicted with in one way or another is spilling out. We're sharing our aversion and attachment with all those around us. It's not personal. So without clear-minded, open-hearted people to be pillars of integrity, this culture will disintegrate. Look at what's presented in the media. Look at the role models in our society. Thankfully, we have wonderful bodhisattvas like the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, to be a beacon of light in a society where really amoral people are put on the pedestal, and sarcasm and shaky ethics are cool to young people. It's essential that we as practitioners embody these teachings, or else it's not going to get better. Your practice matters. Your practice matters deeply. Cause and effect is real. We are not living in an isolated bubble of individuality, but each of us is profoundly connected to each and every other person. So please, my wish, and I think in a way my job as an ordained person, is to encourage faith in the teachings and this amazing lineage you have encountered. Faith in the spiritual technologies that will transform your mind, will transform your suffering, if you apply them, if you really take them to heart and say, this is not about somebody else. This is not about somebody else 1,000 years ago. This is not about someone else at the Dharma Center. This is about my life. This is about my potential. So please take good care of the practice, and I appreciate your companionship.
Oh, Venerable Dogen, Jogan, it's wonderful to hear you. It didn't sound like Zen teaching as opposed to a Tibetan Buddhist teaching. It sounds like you are speaking my words and my understanding. It's so good to see the root core teachings should be as it should be, being the same. And just to fill in my time, yes, Buddha started out by teaching the Four Noble Truths, and it began with dukkha. It ended with the path leading to liberation, but it began with dukkha. And there is a purpose behind that. We are so, to borrow your word, numbing ourselves out of the reality. And we were recognizing things mistakenly. So the first need for Buddha was for us to awaken to our reality, which is dukkha. Not that every reality should necessarily be dukkha, but as we are in this unenlightened existence, it is dukkha. And that should not always be the case. It doesn't need to be the case. And there is a way out of that. Even in our daily life, the more we practice in the real sense, not practice in the sense of I will feel good. Feel good we can have from so many things. Yes, from sitting in a cushion, quietly contemplating on the breath, even thinking of bodhicitta, love, compassion, but only as a means of feeling good at the time. It would exhaust itself then and there. Once you come out, again you confront with things, you wouldn't feel good. You would end up reaching for things, for some even Coca-Cola. The moment you open, it opens happiness. So their happiness is equated with feeling good temporarily. That part needs to be cleared up. We need to be more serious. As the expression goes, come on, we need to be more serious. Get down to the real thing. Just don't float on the surface. In the Tibetan tradition, we call that using a brocade fabric for mopping the floor. Yes, it can mop the floor, but it can do much more. Usually, we only use Dharma to feel good. It's another question to ask of ourselves, to look further beyond this existence, beyond this life. People, some may be inclined, some may not be. But it has to be given its time. Of course, we have to make effort. But even without that also, given the limited time, but we don't know how long is that time for any of us. Given that limited time also, we need to be doing a much better job in going deeper down, in really practicing the Dharma in the way that Venerable Jogan has explained us. In really getting to the actual reality of who we are, where the crux lies, where the problems come. We have this tendency of pointing out. He did this, he made me angry. That is false. He made me angry. Or he could be doing the same thing, but you can still be calm and quiet, composed. That's a clear indication that he didn't make you angry. You offered to be angry. Very often we extend our hand in the expectation of some reward, and when we don't see the reward coming, we feel terrible. If in the first place we didn't extend our hand, there will be no expectation there. Rewards come, good, no suffering. Likewise, the same case with our desire, anger, jealousy. Those are all wrong projections that we project out. And when they are not responded, and even if they are responded to, the products we get, end products we get from them, are only lasting for a very short time and could have done even more damage than benefit. So that's how we keep on going. That's not getting serious. I mean, and that needs to be very serious in that that holds the key to the happiness that we are looking for. By now, humanity should be very clear of where happiness comes from. We have ample examples in the history of kings, scholars, whatnot, celebrities, rich, poor, both rich, poor, healthy, unhealthy, etc., etc., who had not a stereotype feeling of their particular type, but it depends mainly on how serious they have done in terms of realizing their own actual reality. So the first and foremost in being able to do a good job in extending love and compassion towards others is to be able to extend love and compassion to ourselves. We say, I love myself, but what we do, we feed ourselves with junks. That's not loving. Be that material junks or spiritual junk or conceptual junk, whatever, we feed that. That's not loving. That's not worthy of calling, I love it. I love myself. No? That's what we call misinformed love. Misdirected love, misinformed love. There can be so many misdirected love, should it be misdirected or misinformed love, misinformed compassion, etc., etc. So that also needs to be looked at for. So it has to begin with seeing our own reality and being able to care ourselves, love ourselves. And then from there grows the seed of loving others. So first and foremost is recognizing our reality, which is not that a good picture, at least so long as we remain within an unenlightened state of being. Unenlightened in the sense that our whole being is ruled by anger, jealousy, greed, malice, etc., etc. And then at the root of that, many misconceptions alluding to seeing things as they are not, to the point of seeing things impermanent as permanent, seeing things as unsatisfactory, limited as being all promising. We all have this experience. If only I could get that, then I wouldn't ask for anything. If only I could get at that top of the mountain, then that's it. Once you get there, you see another top. You wanting more. So we do not start right away, start out with that understanding that yes, there should be another one. Should not be too expecting like that. So those kind of understandings need to be built much ahead in our life. They should not be coming later in life. And so goes the same. Deep down is our identity. We have really an identity crisis. I know there is a quotation ascribed to Albert Einstein, but some say it might not be his. But anyhow, he was pointing to an optical illusion of seeing ourselves as cut out units, not being part of the whole. Whereas in reality we are. In this regard, Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen master from Vietnam, he says we need to be able to see things as interdependent. We inter-R, I inter-M. Whatever I am is interdependently am, with no intrinsic, substantial, essential I as such. But we usually do not go about our life understanding that way, thinking that way. We kind of take that as granted. Sometimes even kind of reason to ourselves, saying, if not that, how things could ever exist, if not for them to have an intrinsic, individual, what you call, cut out. identity of their own. So there's this need of digging deeper and getting more serious in really being able to see the underlying, underlying fetters that keep us from loving ourselves, knowing ourselves for who we are to begin with, and then growing from there to kind of extend out to others. Just one thing, in Tibetan Buddhism, and that should be definitely in the Zen Buddhism also, when we speak of compassion, we speak of, there are so many levels, different types of compassion we speak of. One category of classification of compassion is, one is compassion which sees the suffering and of oneself and others, and thereby aspires to be freed from that. Just compassion, just suffering as such. One goes deeper down in seeing what causes suffering within oneself, and thus lump that together as a source to kind of feel concerned over oneself, and then extend that to others. So in that level, there are two layers. One, seeing how our projection of permanence kind of lends itself into our doggedness. And then the other is this very subtle layer of our projecting intrinsic identity to oneself and to just about everything. And with those addition of insight into one's reality, when they are conjoined, coupled with one's sense of concern, sensitivity to one's suffering, to that to others, it becomes much more stronger. With that strong compassion, I will leave it here. We almost have no time. Yeah, should be fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both for that. Lovely expositions. So now we have quite a bit of time for people who wish to ask questions of Jogan or Geshe-Dado. And I think we'll bring around the microphone. Anyone?
Kishi, yeah.
Okay. Well, it'd be difficult to ask my question as eloquently as you've all spoken, but I understand your background is art as well, that you're an artist. And so I'm curious, as we look at the realms of the three poisons, right? Aversion or attachment, especially attachment, as I explore art, I'm just curious, where do you feel that border between that desire to create, the desire to express something? Where is I'm just curious, I guess, of the relationship there between the art and attachment or desire to express something.
I think for me, it's boiled down to motivation. So I can create art just based on a desire for self-expression or even self-aggrandizement, or just basic pleasure. This is fun to do. But as I've practiced, if I change my intention and make that art an offering of a certain state of mind, of the state of mind of Dharma, then the attachment becomes a non-issue, and the energy in a way becomes transmuted and is used for good. So it's really, I think, important. We're communicating a state of mind with our art. And what are we putting out there? And what is the core motivation? And then the attachment stuff will just sort itself out.
May I say something here? Basically, yeah, I have seen this, people bring up this question. And I remember my school days when in the history book, when it deals with Buddhism, it says Buddhism considers desire to be the root of suffering. Don't have desire at all. I later found out that was a mistake. I even found out how in the scripture there are occasions when desire would be pointed out. Desire, although the translation may not be the same, it is. Sometimes people use attachment, sometimes people use desire for that same concept. Or sometimes they would speak of different degrees of desire and then say desire, craving, something like that. So both of them come in the same category. But when, in that context, when we speak of desire, it is not desire per se. It is a desire with an extension of exaggeration of the reality. So that's where we are speaking of letting go or letting be. It's not about denying things. A good metaphor would be that of a good metaphor would be that of a tigress carrying its cubs. If it needs to carry, it would carry it in its jaws, right? Jaws, which are sharp. But it would carry it in such a way that the cubs would not be hurt, nor would it fall. If you say, I'm not attached, it would fall down, right? I'm attached, it should fall, then the cub would be hurt in between. Likewise, we can go about the same way with everything we need to do, everything we want to do. We do that within a perspective of what it is for what it is in reality, and not give in to that tendency to project it more than what it is. So letting go is a big deal. It's very difficult. It's about maintaining the balance between holding and clinging. So letting go, although it would sound, that time itself would say, let go, we would live like that. That's not what Buddhism is taking. When we say let go, we may be holding like this, we say, let go. Now we'll be able to carry the thing, but not hurting ourselves, muscles. So the balance between holding on and completely letting go. We could do the same thing with our relationships. We could do the same thing with our work. With everything we can do a letting go exercise of not doing overly. That's when we overly emphasize, when we overly invest in our relationships, in our work, in our position, reputation, and whatnot, then under the weight of that, we become blind of what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is not, and that becomes very clear. And then in the meantime, because of that, what you call that extra projection, extra investment, we suffer. We suffer more after things have happened. In the course, the things are happening. And suffering, except for physical pains or whatnot, suffering actually is a mental exercise, mental happening. And that happens when those underdoing and overdoing happens. So that's my understanding. Thank you.
Greetings to you all. You hear sometimes people say, no pain, no gain. Is it true that suffering is a part of life that we should have to go through in order to live and to be happy? Like, for example, we have to suffer, and then after we suffer, we go through the suffering, and we learn from the suffering, and then we can achieve happiness and things like that. Is that correct? Are we meant to suffer?
See, that's very good. Again, there is a misconception, even among the Buddhist practitioners. Say, oh, I'm a Buddhist practitioner. I'm not supposed to have this food. I'd rather have a very frugal one. I'd rather go without food. It is not so much the case that we have to suffer. We have no choice but to suffer. That's our given reality. So the effort is to come out of that. If we come out of that, we wouldn't need to come back and again be liberated. Particularly the liberation that we are speaking of, nirvana, which is not about an abode or a place out there, but rather dealing deep with our actual existential problems, deep, as Venerable Jogan pointed out, exhaustively, to the point of really, exposing the underlying, basic underlying misconception. When we do that, then we would have done away with the upper layers of sufferings, upper layers of sediments, suffering sediments, beginning with the emotions, afflicted emotions, followed by the crystallized actions, followed by their expressed sufferings. Those would be done. So in our case, we have no choice but endure this condition that we are in. So it's not so much the case that one has to suffer. So by such an understanding, kind of bring more suffering upon oneself. What we have is enough, and that's something we have no choice but to. So from there, we have to come out. So basically, suffering happens from our mental habituation, from our mental, habits of almost like reeling in afflictions. So that part we need to recognize. And then do our job, better job, in really digging deep and doing a thorough job of clearing it out. Then once that is done, then even if we find ourselves in the same situation, in the same condition, in the same situation outwardly, even with pains, even with illnesses, old age, whatnot, mentally we'll be free. So there's a way of really, as Venerable Jogan pointed out, freeing up our potential for freedom. In this regard, in the classical Buddhist text, it speaks of the bodhisattvas from the path of seeing upward, the Arya bodhisattvas. That they may go through old age but not suffer the suffering of old age. They may go through illness but not suffer. So there is a potential within us to really overwhelm, to really overcome, to really overwhelm, of course, overcome our physical conditions even. So it's just not so much about how we look in terms of what we appear to be going through physically, outwardly, economically, whatnot, but in terms of how equipped we are, how confident we are inward. But confidence comes from practice, not from just faking up that I am confident. No, that will not do. In the working of emotions, there's no faking up. There is no room for faking up. No matter how much you're going to project that everything is good, if it is not good, if you have not done the inner homework, there's no way it will feel good here. But depending on how much work you do, you can get a relative freeing up. But the emphasis is to really take Dharma seriously. When we say Dharma, please don't mistake it for Buddhism. By that, what I mean is the universal law of what causes suffering, what is suffering, what is the path out of suffering, what are the potentials that we can reach to, irrespective of who we are, Buddhist, non-Buddhist, East, West, nothing. That's what we mean by Dharma. And when you dig deeper, look closer, we will see those pearls of Dharma in every major religion.
I have one more question, if I can.
Yes.
This is based upon one of the things that was said by both of you. Actually, you both sounded the same. I don't mean any punning, no pun intended, but I heard the same thing from both of you, which is a confirmation to me, and I thank you both. But my question is, what needs to be done for our children so that our children know what you're teaching now before they get my age? In reference to the misinformation of love and how to know what love is based upon what he says is seen on television and magazines and things like that. How do we teach the children that before they get our age?
I think the parent's practice is the primary model.
Definitely, that's what I was
the child is from the get-go mirroring the parent's way of being and learning on many different levels. So there's great fuel to really turn up the notch on your own practice and embody the teachings as best you can. The other aspect is children come into this world with their own karmic potentialities, and we don't know. We don't know what will sprout. It's mysterious. We can't see that. So we can only do our best. Even if you were the perfect parent and you raised your child in a pristine Buddhist monastery, they might still turn out a little rotten. So cause and effect is a reality, and what we can do is try to influence that as best we can. But other than that, it's a mystery. We just wholeheartedly do our best to be an example.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is room to bring about change. When, just as Venerable Jogan has pointed out, we do the best. When we do the best, it can have an effect. It is when we do the best, from a Buddhist term, very classical Buddhist term, when we say, when we do the, because people sometimes misunderstand karma as predeterminism. No matter what, it is already given there, you do not do anything, right? It will just unfold of itself. It is just a nasty, obstinate, fixed thing there. No. Even from a very classical Buddhist understanding of karma, in terms of sufferings, in terms of sufferings, pains, joy, pleasure that you experience, you have to have some condition within you because you are experiencing it. But others can affect what you experience. Others can punch. Which aspect in you can give rise to suffering? Which aspect in you can give rise to pleasure, happiness? So, because from a classical Buddhist point of view, we aren't completely novel things. We have been coming from long time ago. And unless and until we make a change, we could still be going along but keep spiraling, not getting out of the bondage of afflictions. Just as we are as much caught in this network of afflictions, giving rise to another afflictions, whatnot. Unless we do take Dharma seriously, we could still be going on, coming back, and then still be doing PhD next time, or masters, bachelors, whatever, or geshe degree, one again and again and again and again. That's not fun, right? So right now I'm just taking up geshe degree or any kind of academic degree, but the same goes with any of the trainings that we aspire to do. We could be doing it repeated. We could have done it so many times. Where have we reached? That's because we have not done a deep, thorough practice. Because with that, then there's a possibility of eventually coming out of the spiral, boom, like this. So that's the understanding. So even with that kind of understanding, the sufferings or the pleasures, the potential for us to endure pain, suffering, whatnot, we have a part to contribute to. For a tin to fall in one particular way, It is not totally determined by where it falls. It will also be determined by what shape it has. Depending on different shapes of things, when they fall from the same distance, they would end up behaving differently. But what we can do is we can keep them from falling if falling is not good. So that's what Venerable Jogan is also referring to. That we must do our best. And the best we can do is by being an undeniable, persistent, consistent role model. Then, even if the problems grow, it will be a welcome addition to one's own growth. Maybe I shared this one time in Tibetan Buddhist practice for this very, very serious ones. There's even a practice of quoting problem. Quoting problem so that one could expedite one's journey of growth. So there's the possibility there. So I fully agree with Venerable Jogan when he says that we have to present ourselves as a role model. A role model, the best we can do is by having done the inner practice ourselves. You're welcome. Yes.
When you're talking about suffering, you make me feel like suffering is concept of you solidify suffering. And come on, I was thinking excrement is also manure. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, thank you.
How are we on time?
Yeah.
Do you have time for another question?
Maybe. Yeah, one more question. Let this be the last bonus question.
Thank you for this opportunity to think religious practice, Dharma practice, and art, a little bit coming into that practice. Art is not separate from our life practice, whereas many people think art is an escape from life's suffering. I would like to ask, in terms of artistic practice, what do monks do? I come from Zen tradition, and I have known and learned about many Zen monks who are such good calligraphers, painters. Their training in Zen comes out as marks of brush, moment of expression. And that becomes their Dharma practice, and then it becomes the offering to people, just as you just mentioned. You do from your desire, however, at the point of the fruit of your action, you are not attached to that fruit of the action, but you toss it into the world. I do not know much about what Tibetan Buddhist monks do in that kind of spontaneous artistic expression. Yes, we do know you are trained to do very precise sand mandala paintings. Where do you take it from that very precise training to spontaneous sort of daily Dharma practice or expression?
Sure, yeah. So it's actually part of the traditional training to learn calligraphy and also poetry, which is a delightful part of the Chinese and the Japanese heritage of my particular lineage, because the Chinese language is already poetic. It just lends itself to that. That's part of the way the non-conceptual expression of Zen was able to flower, was through the Chinese ideograph, which is not necessarily linear. It's in a way holographic, and many meanings and a lot of richness can be contained. So in the training for funerals, a Zen monk has to write poems, expressing understanding, using it as an opportunity for teaching at that moment. There's moon ceremonies, full moon, appreciating the full moon, writing poems, and it's a kind of playful competition, who can write the most lucid poem, and the moon is a metaphor in Zen, as you know, for the awakened mind. And poems for the koan practice are also written, in that you express your understanding of the master's teaching by writing your own verse to complement or to show appreciation. And there's been a lot of different arts that have flown out of this practice of spontaneity, and it's seen in a way as an extension of shamatha practice, as an extension of single-minded focus and the unhindered mind. The mind that's not self-conscious can express itself so much more freely. When the inner critic is not kind of inhibiting our energy, we can act and express and flow, and that spirit pervades the Zen arts.
Now comes Tibetan art.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, in the Tibetan monasteries, it will differ in terms of what their emphasis is. There are monasteries where emphasis are put on artistic, artistic works. It could take place in the form of spiritual dances, of course, singing. We have chorus within the monastery. We have a term for that. One is called Dönsang, another is called Kaesang. Dönsang, one is the category of group who would be trained in doing the multiphonic singing. And the others would be doing the natural singing. So there would be occasional meetings, occasional, do you say occasional, for lack of the right term, brush-ups. They meet annually to learn the notes, also sing together, and then there will be competition also, whether someone could sing out some, or someone could melody out some, if I may say. And then, yes, in terms of painting, Tanka painting and other paintings, they are taught that. But as you have noticed, as part of the training, as far as I know, there is no such emphasis on the spontaneity, spontaneous creativity there. One can do that. There is no specific rule against it. But when they are taught this, they have a particular structure. But then within that structure, they can allow for some creativity here and there. And of course, poetry is a big thing. The writings of great masters like Tsongkhapa and likewise masters from other orders of Tibetan Buddhism. They are beautiful poetic works, very beautiful. So art would not be seen as needing a separate training or needing or being considered something apart from the Dharma practice. It would be part of the Dharma practice. And inspirations for that would come from the Indian siddhas, Indian adepts, Indian great Indian siddhas. One of them was a cobbler by profession, but while mending shoes, making shoes, he could integrate, bring in the deepest Dharma awakening in that, of interdependence, of no intrinsic identity, with every stroke. So likewise, it can be brought, it should be brought, it can be brought into just anything one does. And that's the beauty of Dharma. It shouldn't be limited to one specific way of doing and not the other. But you are right in terms of what do you call institutional training. There is an apparent lack, as far as I know, but I don't know much. So, as far as I know, that is spontaneity, creativity. Of course, in poetry, whatnot, there should be, but in terms of paintings, dances, whatnot, the movements, they are all very structured. Okay.
That's it. So thank you everyone for your participation, your attention, and thank you Venerable Jogen and Geshe Dadul for joining us and
Thank you
facilitating
for
this.
bringing Venerable Jogen here and making this possible for every one of us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Should we say dedication, please? Please join me in dedication. May the precious and sublime mind of Bodhicitta, wherever it is not born, be born. Wherever it has born, become strengthened, enhance, and grow furthermore. May it be so. Chanchu Semcho Rinpoche, Ma Ye Panam Ye Ju Chi, Ye Ba Nyamba Me Ba Yang. Gong Ne Gong Du Pe War Sho, Tong Yi Tawa Rinpoche, Ma Ye Panam Ye Ju Chi. Ye Ba Nyamba Me Ba Yang, Gong Ne Gong Du Pe War Sho. May the precious insight into the ultimate reality of things, not yet born, be born. May that which has been born grow evermore. Thank you.